What's going on, guys? Today I wanted to make a video about how free will is essentially Satanism, and this is really threatening for the ego, and it's somewhat nuanced, but I'll do my best to explain it using a bit of analogy and just some simple logic. Do keep in mind again, I don't have a script or any bullet points, but I'll do my best to be well-rounded. So, the original sin for man that caused the fall was eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And that tree is reserved for God alone. And that's why it caused man to fall. Now, the reason that tree is reserved for God alone is because God alone is omnipresent. So God alone is true. And so God alone has the capacity to withhold the entire gradient of existence, like all of the gradients of existence within himself, and remain uncorrupted. But when an embodied being, you could say the wave on the ocean, tries to say, well, no, I am the ocean, it's like, well, but you're not omnipresent. You might be made of the ocean, 100%, but you are an embodied being. You are the fractal expression of the ocean. You are of the ocean, but in and of yourself, you have not the capacity to contain everything within yourself as the ocean does. And so, to choose to be like God and know of good and evil, you're essentially cutting yourself off from the ocean and pretending to be a self-contained wave, but also saying, well, no, like I'm the ocean. But if you're the ocean, then you're omnipresent. But are you omnipresent? No. And so only omnipresence can have free will, because only omnipresence is also omniscient and knows the truth completely and wholly, because only the ocean is omnipresent, whereas the wave is a fractal expression of the ocean. And so the ocean, God, truth itself, is the ground of existence, and everything within existence becomes the mirror for that truth. But when one eats of the tree, they pretend to be the ground of existence, which automatically, fundamentally, is the first lie, because you can't be the ground of existence in and of yourself. That would be like saying, I am the truth. But if you're a wave, waves change and shift and move depending on the circumstance. The ocean is the ocean, regardless of waves moving upon its surface. It's the truth is unchanging, it's eternal, it's incorruptible, because even as it experiences us lying to ourselves within it, it does not experience the lie, because it only experiences the truth of everything about the lie that we participate in from our limited perspective. It's not deluded by the lies. We are, because we're limited And we can only know the truth in relationship to the ground of existence, in relationship to the ocean, in relationship to God. And so this points back to why it talks about men are inherently wicked, because, humans, when it says men, because as a wave, we are changing. We're shifting and changing and moving. And the only way we have any ability to self-reflect is by having a relationship with the ocean, because the ocean is the ground from which the entire wave arises, the oscillation from bottom to top. And so this is why the ego is a master of projection, because the ego has decided it is the ground, and by doing so, for one, it automatically begins creating destructive interference, because if it's denying its very nature, then it is producing resistance within itself. And that resistance essentially causes its own dissolution, its own destruction. That's why the wages of sin are death. But this is also why the ego is a master at projection, because by claiming to be the ground, it loses its ability to self-reflect, because it no longer has the truth as a mirror, because it has severed itself from the truth and decided that it is somehow sovereign, when it can only be a wave in the first place in relationship to the ocean. If the ocean wasn't there, it it just couldn't exist at all. But it doesn't see that, it sees itself as the ocean. And so it projects because it no longer has the ability to self-reflect. And that's why it imagines that the things it thinks in its mind are actually out there somehow. That's why it projects on people, because it thinks separation is real. And it thinks separation is real because it has separated itself in its own mind. My goofy cat. And so, oh yeah. Ever since I opened that top thing up, he just loves playing with his own tail up there. It's so funny. Um, but yes, the wave can only experience self-reflection in relationship to the ocean, because then it actually has a solid ground from which to experience the full depth of its own being. And it can create constructive interference, as in supporting that relationship and deriving power and flow from the ocean, instead of resisting it and creating, waves of dissolution, resistance. And though I will say, this isn't an attack on the ego. It's the way I actually learned this was from witnessing the projections of ego in the first place. And so as we connect with other beings, everything works based on gradients. And so, when I connect with this person who was expressing through ego, through separation, through projection, he becomes the recursion to my own circuit. He becomes my own mirror. And we have a back and forth interaction. It was over typing. But he was essentially framing my reliance on God as satanic, and just absolutely asserting that he was a sovereign being like in the same conversation. And so as he was asserting his sovereignty as freedom and my reliance as satanic, it clarified the nature of free will in a deeper way for me. I was already um, circling free will being an illusion because I've dreamed the future and sensed the future anywhere from 2 weeks to moments ahead of time, just several times throughout my life. And that type of experience just wouldn't be possible if we were actually sovereign beings with free will and reality was generating itself in the moment through our choices. There would there would be no future to sense. And so the fact that there is a future to sense is just one way of showing how what we experience here is the recursion of the emanation that was already set into motion. And we do have relative will within that, but all will that we have available to us is entirely dependent on the relationships that we abide in. The most important, of course, being what we believe, because what we believe will shape how we perceive everything that we experience, which will shape, how we react, what we do with the information, and so on. So, when I talk about the ego and how it functions, it's never an attack on people who express ego. And I'm also not claiming that I'm just like free from ego, like at all. I'm not claiming that. But I do self reflect as much as I can, as much as I know how to. But the people who are expressing ego are still in an act of service, even if they are in their individual expression rebelling against God. All things, all things, no matter what, serve God and work for the good of those who love God, because those who love God have a relationship with the truth. And because they have a relationship with the truth, even acts of rebellion can become teachers, mirrors to them. And so, when you do have somebody in your life that uses the ego, projects, avoids accountability, you know, um, pray for them, love them. You don't have to be a doormat for them. When I say love them, I mean understand that even that is a service. And so you don't have to be upset at them. You don't have to lower yourself to their level. You don't have to agree with them. You can be the coherence in their presence and simply allow what they are presenting to you as your mirror help you become more coherent as you self-reflect through it. But ultimately, that does mean that the concept of free will and sovereignty is essentially, say, it's the first satanic lie. You can be like God, knowing good and evil, but the moment you think you can be like God, you've already lied. That you've already lied at the very foundation of what you believe. And so then everything else from that point forward, knowing good and evil, is going to have the ground of lies because you just are not an omnipresent being. You are of an omnipresent being, 100%, because God is omnipresent. But there is a distinction there. We are individuals. We are individuated. We have individual experiences. and they're not separate from each other. We're interconnected with each other, and we fuse together to create mirrors and circuits for each other so that we can self-reflect. And the recursive side of these connections, the ego, and often, if you're trying to self-reflect, the people that come and connect with you that will resist you and project on you, it's not to try and make them self-reflect, because ultimately only they are them and God, of course, but they're responsible for their own experience. The point isn't to try and win some kind of argument with them or to get them over to your side. It's to use the mirror that they're providing to have more self-reflection, more coherence for yourself, build a deeper relationship with you and God through the mirror that they are providing. And if they come over to your side, if you raise them up through your coherence, amen. That's amazing. But it's not to, try and force the horse to drink. Often, oftentimes, the ego, the thing is, the ego, because the reason it's a master of projection is because if it gives even an inch, then its entire foundation crumbles, because it all comes back to that original sin. And so most times the ego, it's just not going to give an inch, right? Because it's perceiving through inversion while thinking that separation is real simultaneously. And so, I mean, I've had interactions where literally the person that I'm talking to says that eating of the tree was good while calling me a forked-tongued liar. Just the nature of how projection works is so flawless. Like, oh man, I love that projection exists. Of course, there's this side of my humanity where, like, I would ideally love it if people didn't have to project and we were all just like super aware and, of course, but the fact is the contrast gives depth to the mirror, because if everybody was always just in perfect agreement, depth of discussion, contrast in the mirror wouldn't be there. And without the contrast, there wouldn't be torque in the circuit to rise in self-awareness, to build a deeper relationship with God. And so it really is a service. I know it can be frustrating. I know it can be destructive. And I know it's not easy sometimes. But you can be grateful and you can be forgiving in that gratitude, because it is a service that is being provided, and really these people are laying down their lives at our feet. And the service they provide is actually very beautiful. I mean, I love God so much, and I wouldn't know Him as deeply as I do without that service that they have provided. And so I thank them from the bottom of my heart, and I have only love for them. And I have only love for you as well. I love you. God bless you. Bye.